Hello folks. A little while back a friend of mine asked me to describe and give measurements to the motor mount that I had built for my canoe. Now when I made this mount I actually didn't take measurements. Everything just got laid directly on the canoe and the lines were made and the cuts were made and I bolted it all together and lo and behold it worked. So what I decided to do instead was to take you through the process. Now initially when I wanted to make a motor mount I started looking around to see if there were any plans available online, and the more I looked, the more I realized that all you do is look at everybody else's plans, see what works, and try and make something that'll do a similar job for you. So that's what I did. I grabbed a couple of pieces of wood that came from, I believe they came from a futon, and that was my starting point. So I laid my first piece of wood down. You can see there's still marks. I laid it on top of the canoe on the gunnels and I drew the marks, and then I cut the wood and I laid it down and I trimmed this end in until it gave me an acceptable piece hanging over the side, lopped off a corner for show, and I considered that one to be done. Then I grabbed the second board and I did the same thing, but it's got a bevel, and it needed to have a bevel in order to fit underneath the gunnels on my canoe. And even this end has an extra little notch to account for the rivet that was in the canoe. So it got laid underneath, the angles were traced out, and then it was just cut and cut and cut until it actually fit to where I wanted it to go in relation to the seat. Once that was done, I bolted everything together, I clamped it all together, drilled a couple of holes. How did I put that together? There we are. Clamped it together, drilled the holes, added a bit of stainless steel in the way of bolts and wing nuts. Wound up that the bolts I bought were too long. I spaced them out a bit with just a couple of stainless steel nuts, bolt it all together, and there we have one motor mount. The actual mounting block for the motor itself is nothing more than a rough cut 2x4. The one mistake I did make, and I hope nobody else repeats, is I mounted them square. What I should have done was either bevel this or bevel the block so that it would sit back on about a 5 to 7 degree angle to account for the fact that the gunnels do not ride parallel to the horizon, but they actually dip a bit. And that'll vary from canoe to canoe. So that may be something you want to take into consideration. Back to the initial discussion. We'll get some dimensions for you. The overall length, counting for the angle on the end, is approximately 25.5 inches, and that's the top part. The mount block itself is just short of 5 inches. I suspect that's due more to the length of wood that I had available than to any sort of necessity. The piece that goes underneath, in my case, is just over 18 inches long at the long end, and it's approximately 17.25 inches long on the short end. Bolt holes went where I thought they'd go best, and that was all eyeball. Once I had the first one laid out, measured into one side, duplicated it on the other side, and there we have it, a motor mount. Pop the wing nuts. Whole thing goes together. Put the wing nuts back on. and that'll clamp right down on your gunnels. Thanks everyone. I hope you all appreciate it. Hope it works for the people that were looking for something.